The galaxy was a peaceful place, a vast and beautiful expanse of stars and civilizations coexisting in harmony. But all of that changed when the Vroka Empire rose from the shadows. The galaxy had heard rumors of the Vroka, stories of their brutality and unrelenting desire for domination. But most dismissed them as myths, mere whispers in the dark corners of space. No one could have known how terrifyingly true those stories were. The Vroka weren't just any alien race. They were the embodiment of destruction itself. They came from a distant, unknown corner of the galaxy, and their empire spread like a disease, infecting everything in its path. What made the Vroka truly terrifying was not just their immense size or their highly advanced technology, but their ruthlessness. They conquered entire planets, enslaving or wiping out entire populations without a second thought. Their warships were monstrous, invisible to the naked eye, thanks to advanced cloaking technology. The Vroka soldiers were no less terrifying. Enhanced by artificial intelligence and cybernetic implants, they were living weapons, unstoppable in battle. It was one such warship that appeared out of nowhere, cloaked and silent, over a small human colony on the outer rim. The colony, a peaceful settlement of farmers and traders, had no defense against such a powerful force. As the Vroka ship decloaked, it was too late. The human defenses, outdated and ineffective, barely registered the threat before the bombardment began. The first shots were devastating. Buildings crumbled, explosions rocked the ground, and the sky was set ablaze with fire and debris. Panic spread like wildfire as the civilians scrambled for shelter, but there was nowhere to hide. The Vroka didn't need to land troops. Their weapons were so advanced that they could obliterate entire cities from orbit, leaving nothing but ashes behind. The screams of the dying filled the air, but they were drowned out by the roar of explosions and the whirring of the Vroka warship's engines. In mere minutes, the colony was gone, reduced to rubble. The Vroka ship cloaked again, leaving no trace of their presence except the destruction they had left behind. It was a perfect strike, efficient, brutal, and without mercy. The galaxy now knew that the Vroka were real, and their terror had just begun. News of the attack spread quickly, and fear gripped the hearts of many. The Vroka had declared war, and no one knew who would be next. But amidst the fear, a glimmer of hope remained. Humanity wasn't going to go down without a fight. The human fleet, though small and lacking in advanced technology, wasn't going to let the Vroka wipe them out. Among the many ships in humanity's arsenal, there was one that stood out, the Mornhawk. A warship built for the most dangerous missions, it was the pride of the human fleet, captained by the brave and resolute Captain Cade. The Mornhawk had been dispatched to investigate the distress signal from the colony, and what it found there would change everything. As the Mornhawk approached the ruined planet, the crew saw the aftermath of the Vroka's wrath. The planet's surface was a smoldering wreck, with no sign of life left. It was clear that the Vroka were here, and they were no longer interested in just conquering. They were on a mission to exterminate. The crew of the Mornhawk knew they had no chance of standing up to the Vroka fleet head-on. But Captain Cade wasn't one to back down. The Vroka fleet was closing in fast, and there was no way to avoid a confrontation. As the Mornhawk entered the planet's orbit, the crew's hearts raced. They had never faced anything like the Vroka before. Their sensors were scrambled by the cloaking devices, and they had no way of tracking the enemy. Suddenly, the Vroka ships decloaked, and the battle began. The humans fought back with everything they had. The Mornhawk wasn't a match for the advanced Vroka warships, but Captain Cade had one advantage. He knew how to think outside the box. As the Vroka opened fire, Cade ordered evasive maneuvers. The Mornhawk darted and weaved through space, dodging the Vroka's devastating blasts. The Vroka soldiers on the ship were trained to fight in organized, calculated ways. But humans, they were unpredictable. They didn't fight by the rules. In a desperate move, Cade ordered the Mornhawk to make a sharp dive toward a nearby asteroid belt. The Vroka, unable to anticipate such an unorthodox move, struggled to keep up. The humans used the asteroid field as cover, slipping in and out of the rocks, avoiding the Vroka's weapons. It wasn't much of a victory, but it was enough to get them out alive. As the Mornhawk retreated into the safety of deep space, Captain Cade couldn't shake the feeling of relief mixed with dread. They had survived, but just barely. The Vroka fleet was still out there, and they knew now that humans weren't going to be easy prey. What shocked the Vroka most wasn't that the humans had escaped. It was that they had managed to fight back at all. The Vroka had always considered themselves superior to every other species in the galaxy. Their technology was advanced beyond anything humanity had ever dreamed of. But in that brief encounter, they had seen something in the humans, something they didn't understand. The Vroka's AI-driven war machines and cloaking technology had failed to predict human creativity, ingenuity, and unpredictability. This was something the Vroka had not accounted for. It wasn't just the humans' technology they had underestimated. It was their spirit. As the Mornhawk slipped away from the battle, the crew couldn't help but feel the weight of what they had just experienced. They had faced the Vroka and survived, but they knew that this was only the beginning. The Vroka would be back, and next time, they wouldn't make the same mistake. The war for humanity's survival was only starting, and it would take everything the humans had to fight back against the terror of the galaxy. The galaxy now had two sides: the merciless Vroka, who saw their empire as unstoppable, and the humans, who had been thrust into a war they never wanted, but were determined to win. The Vroka had underestimated humanity's will to survive, and they would soon learn that humans would fight to the very end. The galaxy was waking up to the reality of an impending war. While the Vroka Empire continued its merciless assault on planet after planet, humans across various colonies began to realize that they couldn't sit back and let their world crumble. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for everything they held dear. The odds were heavily stacked against them. The Vroka possessed advanced technology, cloaking devices, AI-powered soldiers, and warships capable of devastating entire colonies. Humanity, on the other hand, had no such technological advantage. They didn't have invisibility or advanced weaponry, but what they did have was their ingenuity, determination, and a refusal to back down. As the Vroka continued their invasion across the galaxy, human colonies slowly began to unite. They started to organize resistance groups and guerrilla forces. These scattered pockets of humanity, once independent and isolated, realized that only together could they fight back. But they knew they couldn't face the Vroka head-on. The humans needed to adapt, and they needed to think differently. So they began to develop new strategies and technologies to level the playing field. Cloaking devices, once a Vroka secret, were reverse-engineered by human scientists. It wasn't perfect, but it allowed the humans to blend into their surroundings, hiding from the Vroka's all-seeing sensors. They developed EMP weapons capable of disabling the Vroka's advanced tech and modified drones for reconnaissance and sabotage missions. While the humans couldn't match the sheer power of the Vroka, they could still strike when the Vroka least expected it, using their cleverness and unpredictability to turn the tide in small but significant ways. In the midst of this chaos, one person stood out: Captain Cade. Cade had always been a natural leader, but the war had turned him into something more, a symbol of hope for the entire human resistance. Alongside him was his trusted crew on the Mornhawk. Together, they had survived the first encounter with the Vroka, and now led the charge in this desperate battle for survival. But even the strongest leaders are vulnerable to pain. And for Cade, that pain came with the loss of his best friend, Bonner. Bonner had been one of the first to volunteer for the resistance. He had been Cade's closest friend, and the two had fought together in numerous skirmishes before the Vroka had arrived. Bonner was a brave, selfless soldier, always putting others before himself. He was a beacon of hope for the crew, a man who never backed down in the face of impossible odds. When the Vroka launched an assault on a nearby colony, Bonner had been one of the first to lead a counterattack. His mission was to buy time for civilians to escape the colony. knowing full well that he might not make it back. The battle was fierce, and despite their best efforts, the resistance couldn't hold back the Vroka. The colony fell, and Bonner, in his final moments, died trying to protect those who could no longer defend themselves. The news of his death hit Captain Cade and the rest of the crew hard. Bonner had been their rock, the one person they could always count on. His death was a painful reminder of the harsh reality they now faced. Cade found himself standing alone in the quiet after the news broke. The crew had gathered in the mess hall, their faces grim, their eyes filled with sadness. Bonner had been more than just a fellow soldier. He had been family. And now, that family was gone. But in that moment of grief, something stirred inside Cade. He knew that Bonner's death couldn't be in vain. He could feel the weight of his friend's sacrifice, and it ignited a fire inside him. A fire that would push him forward, no matter the cost. The crew rallied around Cade. They knew that they couldn't afford to mourn forever. There was a war to fight, and the Vroka weren't going to stop until humanity was crushed. The loss of Bonner only solidified their resolve. They weren't just fighting for their survival anymore. They were fighting for their fallen comrade, for all the innocent lives lost to the Vroka. They would carry on, not just to survive, but to honor the memory of those who had already given everything. With this new determination, the crew of the Mornhawk set their sights on a daring mission: sabotage. Intelligence reports had shown that the Vroka were operating a supply ship in a nearby sector, carrying vital resources for their war effort. If the humans could destroy this ship, it would cripple the Vroka's supply line and give them a much-needed advantage. But the mission was not without its risks. The Vroka ships were heavily guarded, their sensors finely tuned to detect any threat. The humans had no choice but to rely on their newly developed cloaking technology and stealth drones to infiltrate the heavily fortified vessel. If they were detected, there would be no escape. It was a suicide mission, but it was a mission that had to succeed. The team prepared for the operation in silence. Each member of the crew knew what was at stake, and they were all determined to see it through. The Mornhawk's engines hummed as they approached the Vroka ship, cloaking their own vessel just as the enemy sensors began to sweep the area. Stealth drones were launched, slipping silently toward the Vroka supply ship's hull. The plan was simple: disable the Vroka ship's engines, plant explosives in their supply rooms, and get out before the Vroka had a chance to react. As the drones infiltrated the ship, the tension among the crew was palpable. The slightest mistake could lead to their discovery. Cade's heart pounded in his chest as he watched the mission unfold on the screen. Every second felt like an eternity. The drones worked flawlessly at first, infiltrating the enemy ship with ease. But as they neared their target, disaster struck. A Vroka patrol spotted one of the drones. The alert was sounded, and within moments, the ship was on high alert. The humans had been discovered. What followed was a desperate struggle for survival. The crew of the Mornhawk, along with a small team of resistance soldiers, fought their way through the corridors of the Vroka ship, using their EMP weapons to disable enemy tech and their cloaking devices to stay one step ahead of the Vroka soldiers. Explosions rocked the ship as the humans planted their charges and fought to hold off the Vroka long enough to escape. But the cost of the mission was high. Several soldiers were killed in the chaos. Each death weighed heavily on Cade and his crew. These were lives they couldn't afford to lose. But in war, sacrifices had to be made. The mission was a success, but at a terrible price. The Vroka ship was crippled, its supplies destroyed, but the humans paid a heavy toll for their victory. As the survivors returned to the Mornhawk, Cade stood on the bridge, staring out at the stars. The loss of their comrades, their friends, was a bitter reminder of what was at stake. But there was no turning back now. The war had only just begun, and they would not stop fighting until the Vroka Empire was destroyed. For Bonner, for all the fallen, they would continue. The galaxy might tremble at the mention of the Vroka, but the humans had proven they could strike back, and they would never stop until they had their victory. The galaxy had never seen anything like this before. In a war where the odds were stacked impossibly high, where the very existence of countless civilizations was in jeopardy, the humans had done the unthinkable. They had struck back against the Vroka Empire, and they had won. The mission to destroy the Vroka supply ship, though costly, had proven that humanity could hold its own. But it was more than just a victory. It was a beacon of hope. A spark had been lit, and it spread across the galaxy like wildfire. As news of the humans' success reached other planets, something remarkable began to happen. Civilizations that had long lived in fear of the Vroka started to stand up. These were species that had been crushed under the Vroka's might, too terrified to even think of rebellion. For years, they had watched as the Vroka destroyed entire worlds, enslaved populations, and built their empire on the backs of the innocent. But now, something had changed. The humans, with all their technological shortcomings, had shown that resistance was possible. They had shown that the Vroka could be defeated. One by one, civilizations that had once bowed to the Vroka began to send messages of support. Alien species, many of them once subjugated by the Vroka, began to offer their resources, technology, and soldiers to the human cause. The rebellion was no longer just humanity's fight. It was a galactic struggle, with the human spirit as its rallying cry. A coalition of species, all united under one banner, began to form. The resistance grew, and the Vroka started to realize that their stranglehold on the galaxy was beginning to slip. Captain Cade had become more than just a leader. He had become a symbol. His bravery, his determination, and his unwavering belief that the humans could defeat the Vroka had inspired others. But leading the rebellion was no easy task. Every day, Cade was confronted with difficult decisions: who to trust, who to ally with, and how to keep the rebellion from falling apart. The pressure was immense, and there were those who questioned his leadership. They were tired of the losses. They were tired of waiting. But Cade, ever the optimist, continued to push forward. He knew that the war was far from over, but now they had the momentum. One of Cade's greatest challenges came from within his own ranks. The rebellion was growing rapidly, and with growth came diversity, different species, different cultures, different ways of thinking. Some of the new leaders of the resistance had their own ideas on how the war should be fought, and not all of them aligned with Cade's vision. There was tension, doubt, and sometimes even open defiance. Cade's ability to unite these forces was tested time and time again. But no matter the obstacles, he remained steadfast. He was a man who believed in the power of hope. And he believed that the humans, no matter how outmatched they were, could win this fight. His leadership style wasn't about being a dictator or making all the decisions. It was about inspiring those around him to believe in a future where the Vroka no longer ruled. One of Cade's most trusted allies was Rhea, an alien engineer who had once been enslaved by the Vroka. She had been part of their oppressive regime, forced to work for them against her will, using her intellect to help the Vroka perfect their technologies. But Rhea had escaped, and now she had pledged herself to the human cause. She had a deep understanding of the Vroka's advanced tech, and she was determined to use it to help humanity. Under her guidance, the humans began to reverse engineer and adapt Vroka technology for their own use. Rhea's work was nothing short of revolutionary. She helped the humans improve their cloaking devices, giving them the ability to infiltrate enemy territory more effectively. She worked tirelessly to modify EMP weapons, making them more efficient at disabling Vroka tech. Her greatest contribution, however, was her work with the Vroka's AI-driven combat drones. These drones had been the Vroka's most feared weapon, a horde of mechanical soldiers, each capable of independently making combat decisions. But Rhea had discovered a flaw in the AI system, a flaw that, if exploited, could turn the tide of the war. She worked with human scientists and engineers to rewrite the drone's programming, giving the humans control over them. The first test of Rhea's modification came when the Resistance launched a daring assault on a heavily fortified Vroka stronghold. The Vroka had set up a base on a desolate planet, and it was here that they had gathered their forces for the next phase of the war. The stronghold was a symbol of the Vroka's dominance, protected by layers of defense, guarded by hundreds of AI-controlled drones, and equipped with the most advanced weaponry the Vroka had at their disposal. It was considered an impenetrable fortress, and any attempt to strike it would almost certainly end in disaster. But Cade knew that they had to take the fight to the Vroka, and they had to do it now. The humans, with their new alliance of alien species and their modified technology, prepared for the mission. The plan was risky. They would infiltrate the stronghold using cloaking devices, take control of the Vroka's drones, and use them to break through the defenses. The operation would require precise coordination and the bravery of every soldier involved. Cade knew that failure wasn't an option. This mission would not only be a blow to the Vroka's military strength, it would show the galaxy that the resistance was no longer a mere nuisance. It would show that the Vroka could be beaten. As the resistance forces launched their attack, the battle unfolded in a blur of action. The human warriors, armed with advanced weapons and aided by their alien allies, fought through the Vroka's outer defenses. Meanwhile, Raya's team took control of the drones, turning the enemy's greatest weapon against them. The drones, once loyal to the Vroka, now fought for humanity. The tides of the battle shifted rapidly as the humans pressed forward, aided by their new allies and the power of their modified technology. It was the first time that the Vroka had been pushed back. The stronghold, which had once seemed invulnerable, began to crumble under the force of the resistance's attack. Explosions rocked the base, and the once proud Vroka soldiers began to fall. The humans had broken through, and they weren't stopping. But despite the victory, the battle was far from over. The Vroka were a relentless force, and they would not give up easily. But for the first time, the resistance had a taste of what victory could be like. The odds were still against them, but they now had the power to fight back. In the aftermath of the battle, the galaxy buzzed with newfound hope. The resistance had struck a blow against the Vroka that had reverberated across the stars. The Vroka might have been a terrifying empire, but they were not invincible. And as the resistance regrouped, Cade knew that this was only the beginning. The rebellion had ignited, and now they had to see it through to the end. The war had reached its boiling point. For months, humanity had fought back against the Vroka Empire's overwhelming might, using every scrap of ingenuity, every ounce of bravery, and every ounce of hope they could muster. Yet the Vroka remained a seemingly unstoppable force. With their advanced technology, AI-driven warships, and vast armies of genetically enhanced soldiers, they had crushed planet after planet. But despite everything, humanity had managed to strike back, showing the galaxy that they were not just victims. They were a threat, and they would not go down without a fight. The Vroka, stunned by humanity's resilience, now realized that the rebellion was not something they could simply quash with a few more battles. This was a war that could, if left unchecked, bring the entire empire to its knees. They needed to act, and they needed to act fast. In a desperate bid to crush the rebellion once and for all, the Vroka launched what would be their final strike, a full-scale assault to eliminate humanity's forces and wipe out the rebellion's leadership. They knew that if they could destroy the heart of the human resistance, everything else would fall apart. But the humans were ready. They had one last trick up their sleeve. Using their knowledge of the Vroka's weaknesses, information gleaned from their previous victories, and the advanced technology they had adapted, the human fleet made a bold move. They had located a major Vroka base, one that served as a central hub for their operations. It was heavily fortified, surrounded by powerful defense systems, and swarming with Vroka warships. But the humans had figured out a way to exploit the base's weaknesses, a flaw in its defensive grid that could make it vulnerable to a devastating orbital bombardment. The plan was simple, but incredibly dangerous. The human fleet would use their last remaining warships to launch a coordinated attack on the Vroka base. At the same time, a small strike team would infiltrate the base itself to plant a weapon that could disable its core systems, ensuring the orbital bombardment would succeed. The mission would require precision, skill, and a willingness to sacrifice everything. This was the moment of truth, the point where humanity would either emerge victorious or be destroyed. Captain Cade, now a battle-hardened leader with the weight of the galaxy's fate on his shoulders, was faced with a difficult decision. He knew that to ensure the success of the mission, he would need to stay behind. The strike team had to have someone to keep the weapon operational long enough to hit the Vroka's defenses. Cade's decision was clear. He would stay, even if it meant that he might never see his crew again. It was a decision born of love for his people, his crew, and the cause they were fighting for. As Cade prepared for what could be his final moments, he shared a quiet moment with his crew. They all knew the risks, but they had come to respect him, not just as a leader, but as a symbol of their hope and resilience. His willingness to sacrifice himself for the greater good inspired them, and it gave them the strength to push forward. This mission was more than just a military operation. It was a chance to secure a future for their children, for the billions of people who depended on them. It was a chance to strike a blow against the tyranny of the Vroka. The attack began with a flurry of activity. The human fleet launched from their base of operations, their warships moving into position to surround the Vroka base. The Vroka, expecting a much smaller resistance, were caught off guard by the scale and ferocity of the attack. As the humans' warships locked into formation, the skies above the Vroka base darkened with the shadows of approaching ships. On the ground, the situation was just as intense. The strike team, led by Cade, infiltrated the heavily guarded base using cloaking technology. They silently disabled the outer defenses, making their way to the core of the facility. Inside, the base was a labyrinth of steel and shadows. The corridors were lined with Vroka soldiers, armed to the teeth and ready to defend their fortress to the last breath. But the humans moved quickly, striking with precision and determination. Meanwhile, above the planet, the human fleet engaged the Vroka in a brutal space battle. The human ships were heavily outnumbered, and they had to fight with every ounce of strength they had. Vroka warships, bristling with advanced weaponry, fired their devastating energy blasts at the human fleet, but the humans, using their modified cloaking technology and new tactics, were able to dodge and retaliate. Explosions erupted across the battlefield, sending shockwaves through space. The humans had the advantage of surprise, and they used it to devastating effect. In the midst of the chaos, Captain Cade knew that time was running out. The strike team had planted the weapon, and the countdown had begun. If the mission succeeded, the orbital bombardment would be able to take out the core systems of the Vroka base, crippling their operations. But Cade knew that the Vroka would fight back with everything they had, and the human fleet would not be able to hold their position forever. As the battle raged around him, Cade made his decision. He would stay behind to ensure the weapon worked. He could not afford to leave his crew, his people, hanging on the edge of defeat. With a final, heroic act of self-sacrifice, Cade activated the weapon and sealed the doors to the chamber. He would stay behind to make sure the Vroka couldn't stop the attack. As he watched the countdown on the screen, his thoughts turned to his crew, his friends, and the families who had been counting on him. He had led them through the darkest moments, and now he would give everything to ensure their victory. The orbital bombardment began. The skies above the Vroka base lit up with the fire of human resolve. Explosions cascaded down, each one an earth-shattering impact that shook the entire base. The once impenetrable fortress was torn apart, piece by piece. The Vroka, stunned by the relentless assault, struggled to mount any defense. Their warships began to retreat, their ground forces scattering in chaos. The humans had broken through, and the Vroka Empire was on the brink of collapse. On the ground, the final battle between human soldiers and Vroka warriors raged on. The human forces, bolstered by their alien allies, fought tooth and nail to secure the victory. The Vroka, for the first time, were pushed back, their superior technology and numbers no longer enough to ensure their dominance. Every explosion, every bullet, Every strike was a reminder of the price humanity had paid to get here. As the dust settled, the human fleet stood victorious, their mission complete. The Vroka base was in ruins, its defenses shattered, and the galaxy had witnessed a decisive shift in the tides of war. But even in victory, there was sorrow. Cade had given his life for this moment, and his sacrifice would not be forgotten. The humans had fought back against an empire that had thought them weak, and in doing so, they had shown the galaxy that they were a force to be reckoned with. The war was far from over, but for the first time, humanity had the upper hand, and as the resistance celebrated their hard-earned victory, they knew that their struggle was just beginning. The Vroka would not surrender easily, and the galaxy was still full of challenges. But with the tides of war now in their favor, humanity had proven that they were no longer the underdogs. They were the victors. The war that had gripped the galaxy for so long was finally reaching its climactic end. The Vroka, after suffering countless defeats, had retreated to their homeworld. There, in the heart of their empire, they prepared for one final, desperate push to end the rebellion once and for all. The stakes had never been higher, and humanity's future was hanging by a thread. The Vroka, however, were not going down without a fight. They had deployed their ultimate weapon, a super eye-controlled battle station capable of destroying entire planets. This weapon, a technological marvel, had the power to annihilate entire civilizations in an instant. The Vroka believed this weapon would tip the scales in their favor and secure their domination of the galaxy for good. But humanity had other plans. The final battle began with a full-scale assault from both sides. The human fleet, battered but not broken, surged toward the Vroka homeworld. Their ships, small and agile compared to the massive Vroka warships, moved with precision, dodging laser blasts and returning fire. Each ship in the fleet had a crew of determined soldiers who knew that this was their last chance to end the war. The Vroka's battle station loomed above the homeworld like a dark cloud, its immense size and power a constant reminder of the threat it posed. Captain Cade, now a legend among his people, had led humanity through the darkest days of the war. But he knew that the battle was far from over. The Vroka's weapon was formidable, and they would have to do something extraordinary to defeat it. This final mission was a dangerous one that would require everything they had. It was a mission that would decide the fate of the galaxy. As the battle raged in space, Captain Cade, along with Rita, a brilliant alien engineer who had become one of his closest allies, led a small strike team toward the heart of the Vroka Citadel. Their goal was clear: infiltrate the Citadel, plant explosives on the Super AI, and destroy the Vroka's weapon before it could destroy them all. The mission was simple in theory, but incredibly dangerous in practice. The Citadel was heavily guarded, filled with layers of security, Vroka soldiers, and advanced robotic defenses. The team made their way through the Citadel's dark, winding corridors. Each step was a calculated risk, and every corner held the potential for death. The Vroka had anticipated this strike, and they had laid traps at every turn. As they advanced, Captain Cade's team fought through waves of Vroka soldiers, each encounter more intense than the last. Their cloaking technology helped them remain undetected, but it would only work for so long. Soon, they would have to face the Vroka head-on. Rhea, using her knowledge of the Vroka's technology, hacked into the Citadel's security systems, opening doors and disabling alarms. Her quick thinking allowed the team to move deeper into the Citadel, closer to the heart of the Vroka weapon. The atmosphere was tense, the air thick with the weight of what they were about to do. Every moment felt like it could be their last, but there was no turning back now. As they approached the core of the Vroka Super AI, the team encountered the weapon's most advanced defense, a series of robotic soldiers controlled by the AI itself. These robots were designed to anticipate every move, to predict and counteract any attack. The Vroka AI was a genius, capable of calculating millions of possible outcomes in a fraction of a second. But humanity had something the Vroka did not: the unpredictable nature of the human spirit. The robots launched a brutal assault, and the humans fought back with everything they had. The air was filled with the sound of gunfire, the clash of metal against metal, and the screams of soldiers. The humans had learned from their previous battles. They knew how to work together, how to adapt to changing circumstances, and how to use their environment to their advantage. As the robots advanced, the humans used their wits to outsmart them, setting traps and using explosives to take them down one by one. The Vroka Eye tried to predict their every move, but the humans surprised it at every turn. Despite their best efforts, however, the team was taking heavy losses. One by one, soldiers fell in battle, their bodies left behind as the team pushed forward. The tension was palpable. There was no room for mistakes. Captain Cade, who had been at the front of every battle, remained calm, his leadership unwavering. But even he could not escape the brutal reality of war. Finally, they'd reached the heart of the Vroka weapon, the Super Eye's central control chamber. The room was massive, filled with rows of advanced computers and flashing lights. In the center, the AI's mainframe loomed, a massive glowing core surrounded by a force field. It was the beating heart of the Vroka's final weapon, and if they did not destroy it now, all hope would be lost. Captain Cade knew that this would be his final moment. He had led his people through countless battles, but he knew that only by destroying the AI could they hope to defeat the Vroka once and for all. He moved forward, his hand trembling as he placed the explosive device near the eye's core. But before he could finish setting the timer, the AI activated its defense systems. The force field around the core flared to life, and a swarm of robotic guards rushed toward them. In the chaos, Captain Cade was struck by a blast from one of the robots. He collapsed to the ground, gravely injured. Blood poured from his wounds, and his vision blurred as the sounds of battle continued around him. But even as his body fought against him, Cade knew that his mission was complete. He had planted the explosive, and the AI would soon be destroyed. His final words were simple but powerful: for humanity, for the future. As he spoke, he activated the explosive, setting off a chain reaction that would destroy the Vroka's weapon. The AI let out one final chilling scream before its systems were overloaded and shut down. The explosion was cataclysmic. The Super Eye's core shattered, and the citadel itself began to crumble. The Vroka's final weapon was gone, and with it, their hopes of victory. The humans had done it. They had won. As the citadel collapsed around them, the surviving members of the strike team made their way back to the surface. The battle was over, and the Vroka had been defeated. But the cost had been great. Captain Cade, the man who had led them through the darkest times, was gone. His sacrifice had saved them all. But it had come at a terrible price. The galaxy would remember his name for generations to come. Humanity had won the final showdown, but they knew that the war had cost them everything. As the survivors of the rebellion looked out over the burning ruins of the Vroka citadel, they knew that the galaxy had changed forever. The Vroka Empire was no more, and humanity had emerged as the new hope of the galaxy. But it was not just their victory. It was the victory of everyone who had fought alongside them. The aliens who had once been enemies, the people who had risked everything to fight against the Vroka, all stood together, united in their triumph. And as they looked toward the future, they knew that the galaxy would be different from now on. It would be a future of peace, of rebuilding, and of hope, a future where humanity would never again be the underdog. The galaxy had witnessed its most extraordinary battle, a battle that would be remembered for generations to come. After years of intense conflict, humanity had emerged victorious. The Vroka, once an empire that had terrorized countless civilizations, had finally been defeated. Their forces, broken and scattered, had no choice but to surrender. Their once proud fleets were now nothing more than debris, drifting in the void of space. The sound of war had finally faded, replaced by the quiet hum of peace. But the victory came at a great cost. The death toll was staggering. Countless brave men and women had given their lives to bring an end to the Vroka's reign of terror. Heroes like Captain Cade, who had sacrificed everything for the cause, had become legends. Their names would live on, immortalized in the hearts of those who had witnessed their courage and strength. In the wake of the victory, the galaxy was left to rebuild. The once unified Vroka Empire had collapsed into chaos, its leaders either dead or captured. The Vroka's grip on the galaxy had been shattered, and now the survivors of their reign looked to humanity for guidance. What had once been an underdog race, struggling for survival, was now the beacon of hope for countless civilizations. Humanity had proven that it was not just a race of survivors, but one of warriors, capable of standing up to the most powerful empires in the galaxy and coming out victorious. The Human Alliance was formed, a coalition of planets and species that had fought alongside humanity in the war. The alliance was a symbol of unity, a reminder that when different races worked together, they could achieve the impossible. The bonds forged during the rebellion were unbreakable, and the humans stood at the center of it all, their leadership a guiding force in the galaxy's recovery. The surviving members of Captain Cade's crew were hailed as heroes. They had faced impossible odds, and yet they had triumphed. Rhea, the brilliant alien engineer who had once been enslaved by the Vroka, became a symbol of resilience and innovation. Her work in adapting Vroka technology for humanity's use had been a game-changer, and her expertise was in high demand as the galaxy began to rebuild. The crew, now famous throughout the galaxy, were celebrated as the leaders of the Human Alliance. They had not only won the war, they had proven that humanity had a place in the future of the galaxy. As the celebrations unfolded, there was a moment of reflection. The cost of victory had been high, and the faces of those who had lost loved ones were etched with both pride and sorrow. The war had taken so much, but it had also given humanity something priceless: a future. A memorial was erected for Captain Cade, Bonner, and all those who had sacrificed their lives. The monument stood tall, a symbol of the courage, determination, and selflessness that had defined the human spirit during the war. It was a place of remembrance, where the galaxy could honor those who had fought and died for the freedom they now enjoyed. The memorial was not just for the humans who had fallen, but for the countless allies from other species who had fought beside them. It was a testament to the unity that had been forged in the heat of battle, a reminder that the galaxy had come together in its darkest hour. The people of the galaxy gathered to pay their respects. The ceremony was emotional, filled with tears and cheers, as everyone stood together to honor the fallen. The final moments were marked by a speech from one of Captain Cade's closest allies, who spoke of the bravery of the human soldiers and their determination to never give up. The speech was a fitting tribute to the sacrifices that had been made, and it inspired everyone present to carry on the legacy of those who had fought and died. As the ceremony came to a close, the final shot of the memorial showed humanity stepping into a new era. The war was over, and the galaxy was beginning to heal. Humanity had shown that they were not just survivors, but a powerful force capable of standing up against tyranny and oppression. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: humanity was ready for whatever came next. The victory over the Vroka was not just a military triumph, it was a symbol of something greater. It was a reminder of the power of hope, unity, and the unyielding spirit of the underdog. In the face of overwhelming odds, humanity had not only fought back, they had won. They had proven that no matter how dark the future seemed, there was always a way to overcome it. The human spirit, tested and forged in the fires of war, had emerged stronger than ever. Now, as the galaxy looked toward the future, humanity stood at the forefront of a new era. The alliances formed during the war would continue to grow, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Human Alliance, born out of necessity, had become a shining example of what could be accomplished when different species worked together. The Vroka Empire was gone, but the lessons learned from the war would never be forgotten. In the years to come, humanity would continue to lead the charge for peace and prosperity. They would be the protectors of the weak, the champions of justice, and the symbol of hope for all those who had once lived in fear. The galaxy, once torn apart by war, would now look to humanity for guidance. The Vroka were no more, and humanity had proven that they were a force to be reckoned with. As the final message echoed through the galaxy, it was clear that humanity's victory was not just the end of a war, it was the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where hope, unity, and courage would define the future. The victory over the Vroka had shown that no matter how insurmountable the odds may seem, the human spirit would always prevail. And with that, humanity stepped boldly into the future, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead.